What's in the name? Astronomers, astrologers, and mathematicians. Here got be Denmark, now Sweden, 1572. The very first road and railway link joining Scandinavia to Western Europe was completed only recently during the summer of the year 2000. It's a bridge and tunnel connecting Malmö, Sweden, on the eastern bank of the Ocean Sound to Copenhagen, Denmark, roughly 16 kilometers away on the western bank. Prior to the mid 1600s, however, both cities and both banks belonged to the Kingdom of Denmark. Count of Alsund allowed Denmark to regulate the lucrative trade of timber hills and amber ships from Hanseatic cities of the Baltic Sea to the North Sea harbors of England. The lower condition points beyond. The King of Denmark collected a tariff from all foreign ships passing through the Sound upon penalty of being sunk by cannon fire. The most creative place to enforce these payments was, naturally, where the Sound was narrowest. This was a short distance north of Copenhagen, at the castle of Helsingborg, or as it's better known to the English-speaking world, Helsingborg, to the setting of Shakespeare's Hamlet. The year 1572 saw Tycho Brahe back at the Danish court. The Hamlet had been summoned home from his studies in Germany to turn up on the death of his father. Tycho, pronounced Tycho, was not Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark, but as the eldest son of one of Denmark's foremost feudal lords. Tycho was heir to a tremendous fortune, vast land holdings, and along with his noble rank, an expectation that he would serve at the highest level of the state. Yet, by all accounts, Tycho wanted nothing to do with Denmark's administration, its wars, its politics, or its pageantry. For a nobleman like Tycho, the purpose of a university education was not to obtain a degree that would have been unthinkably declassic, but merely to pick up a little worldly polish of the sort that might prove serviceable in war and diplomacy. In this respect, Tycho education backfired spectacularly. He returned from Germany, utterly captivated by the latest advances in alchemy, astronomy, and astrology. He also returned missing half of his nose. One of the other Danish aristocrats at his university had hacked off in a duel. The underlying grievance, it said, was the mockery Tycho received for his astrological prediction of the Sultan of Turkey's death. Embarrassingly for Tycho, it turns out that the Sultan, Suleiman the Magnificent, had died several months beforehand. For the rest of life, Tycho would wear a metal prosthetic nose affixed to his waist with salves and ointments, whether it was of gold or silver copper. The sources vary, and quite possibly he had different noses for different occasions. Far from a badge of dishonor, though, getting disfigured in a duel was probably the most socially acceptable thing Tycho did while at university. Certainly, it would have been more understandable to his noble peers than his reputation for constructing clever astronomical instruments. Returning home to Denmark seems to have exacerbated Tycho's naturally melancholy disposition. He did his best to avoid palace life altogether, taking up residence instead in a small, abandoned monastery on his family's land. Just as in Henry VIII's England, the Protestant Reformation in Denmark entailed the dissolution of the monasteries and the confiscation of their property. The remains of the old monastery called Herat Abbey can still be visited across the sound of Helsingborg, a short distance inland on the site that now belongs to Sweden. At Herat Abbey, Tycho, then 25 years old, vowed a welcome seclusion to wrestle with the overriding worry of his young life. What was to become of him? Was it his duty to serve the Danish crown like his father and his father's father before him? Or could he follow the inclination of his heart and devote himself to the secret of nature? To be or not to be, an astronomer, that was Tycho's question. Whether Tycho was looking for a sign or not, one appeared to him all the same. It would change not only his conception of his own place in the universe, but science's conception of just what sort of place the universe really. As Tycho tells the story, it was a little before dinner when he went to check on some alchemy experiments he had left running in a house near the monastery. On his walk back, he took the opportunity, as he generally did, to observe the night sky. By that evening, it was the 11th of November 1572, he was surprised to see something shining overhead near the stars of the constellation Cassiopeia. And he didn't have the skin either. Whatever it was, it glowed as brightly as the planet Venus, as the brightest object in the night sky after the moon. It was a most strange eruption, as Tycho noted in his characteristically intimidating style. And since from boyhood, I had known all the stars in the sky perfectly, for there is no great difficulty in knowing this. It was obvious enough that no star that ever existed in that part of the sky before, not even a minuscule one, and certainly one of such conspicuous clarity. What was it? What name could Tycho use to describe what he see? According to the science of his day, any transitory phenomenon in the sky and included comets had to be a meteor, and by their very definition, meteors were atmospheric effects occurring somewhere between the Earth and the Moon. That such a phenomenon might occur beyond the Moon was an impossibility for reasons that Tycho revealed, for it is established among all the philosophers, and the thing speaks for itself now and clearly, that in the ethereal region of the celestial universe, no change can occur by generation or decay. Instead, the heavens and ethereal bodies contained within them neither increase nor decrease nor vary in number, size, or brightness, or by any other account. They remain forever the same, similar to themselves in very respect, with the years carrying nothing away. It's a humbling reminder of just how infrequently people look up at the stars that the only record Tycho could find of a similar observation was from Hipparchus 2000 years earlier, and so unthinkable was the idea that the heavens could undergo any sort of alteration that subsequent astronomers were willing to dismiss even the great Hipparchus' testimony as merely a misidentified comet. Much closer to Tycho's time, during the 11th and 12th centuries, Chinese and Arabic astronomers had recorded three such cosmic apparitions, two of which were said to be so bright that they could be seen even during the day. Somehow, the astronomers of Europe had managed not to notice. Be that as it may, on this occasion there was nowhere in the world a more careful witness than Tycho Brahe. Tycho immediately set about taking detailed astronomical observations. Using an instrument of his own design, he continued to do so until the object finally became too faint to see some 16 months later. Yet, just those first few nights of observation were enough to convince Tycho of what he was looking at. There was no meteor. The complete absence of any measurable parallax meant that the object had to be situated far beyond the moon. With supreme self-confidence, Tycho named it Nova Stella, a new star. In his enthusiasm, Tycho proclaimed that his star was a miracle of the sort not seen since Joshua's prayers had halted the sun or the darkening of the sky at Christ's crucifixion. In fact, systematic observation of the heavens would show that new stars or novas appear in the sky very regularly. Indeed, Johannes Kepler, Tycho's sometime assistant and collaborator, would spot another one in 1604. In the in the 1930s, the astronomers Fritz Zwicky and Walter Bethe recognized the phenomena of the result law observed by Tycho and Kepler was fundamentally different from other, less energetic types of novas, and so they coined a new name, supernova. As recently as 2008, astronomers finally confirmed that Tycho's new star was, more specifically, a type Ia supernova. Thus, what Tycho witnessed wasn't the birth of a new star, but the ultraviolet death of an ancient star some 9,000 light years away. It had most likely begun as one half of a binary star system. Then, after burning brightly for billions of years, it ran out of fuel and collapsed in on itself, becoming a superdense with white dwarf, perhaps no bigger in size than the Earth. At the stage it began to feed upon its companion star until, reaching a critical pressure, the whole system detonated in a spectacular thermonuclear explosion that, for a few months at least, made it the brightest star in the Earth's night sky. Today, supernovas and their remnants, late 13, serve as cosmic beacons that help astronomers piece together a coherent story of the universe's age, size, and rate of expansion. Given the billions of trillions of stars in the universe, supernovas are quite rare, but with modern observational techniques, it's not unusual for several hundred to be detected in a single year. In star catalogs, their names bear the prefix XN for supernova, followed by year of discovery, and then a later code if more than one was detected in a given year. Thus, the official name for the phenomenon witnessed by Tycho in SN 1522. Considering its fame, however, astronomers usually call it Tycho supernova, or even more casually, just Tycho. Tycho supernova is of tremendous historical importance because it was the first detailed observation which the old cosmological framework simply could not explain away. Something was wrong in the state of astronomy indeed. Tycho's new star was a small crack in what had previously been considered a pristine crystalline firmament. There would be a, there would be others, so many in fact that the entire system would soon collapse and shatter. It wasn't just the heavens which has proven themselves mutable. A revolution was underway, and science, philosophy, astronomy, and astrology would never the same. A stage for all the world. Forget our own comparatively lengthy times, or even the tumultuous 20th century. When it comes to truly radical disruption, I'm not sure that any era can compare with the 1500s. With a single 50-year span, Columbus returned from the New World Luther instigated the Protestant Reformation, and Copernicus published his argument that the earth orbits the sun. Suddenly, it seemed possible to reimagine everything: new forms of government, new types of religion, even new arrangements of the universe itself. And all of this was amplified as never before by the recent invention of the printing press. In gauging the impact of these new ideas, it's not reasonable to look first at the era's most prominent voices. Shakespeare stands out in this regard not only for his fame but even more pertinently here because his plays contains spoken parts of an astounding 1,100 plus unique characters. Shakespeare is like a voice of voices, and almost one-man statistical sampling of the whole way of Renaissance society. Indeed, as one of his most memorable characters, Hamlet put it, the power of a good play is to hold a square mirror up to nature to submit to her own feature, scorn her own image, and the very edge and body of the time, his form and pressure. The age and time inhabited by Shakespeare's astrologers was, to take them as their words, one brimming with astrology. Some characters seem trapped by the heaven's decrees, like those famously star-crossed lovers, Romeo and Juliet. Others rebel against the idea of a cosmic destiny, as when Cassius exhorts the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars but in ourselves. Yet whatever the words and whatever the actions, Shakespeare's characters, from the roguish nerd points to the regal King Lear, know enough about astrology to pick up on the author's allusions, and so presumably would Shakespeare's audiences. But did Shakespeare or his personae have anything to say about the revolution in astronomy which occurred during his lifetime? Certainly not directly, yet in using astronomical terms such as conjunctive, opposition, and retrograde, Shakespeare seems to have infused Hamlet more so than any of these other plays with cosmological overtones. Take, for instance, Hamlet's exclamation, "Oh God, I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space." It is difficult not to read in this wink toward the idea exposed by Copernicus like Giordano Bruno in Italy and Thomas Digges in England, that if the cosmos wasn't enclosed by a celestial spell, then perhaps it extended infinitely outward. An even more arresting reference to the new astronomy is woven into Hamlet's love letter to Ophelia: "Doubt thou the stars of five, doubt that the sun doth move, doubt truth to be a liar, but never doubt I love." Yet the most eyebrow-raising association of all isn't one of words but of names, because on a contemporary portrait of Tycho Brahe, two of the heraldic shields which proclaim his noble pedigree carry the names that are said by Hamlet's famously hapless schoolmates Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, Figure 9.2. With all of these astral allusions, might there be more to the play than merely what it seems? One modern commentator has connected the drama's dots in such a way as to claim that the entire play is actually an elaborate astronomical allegory, and who better to present the false, geocentric universe of Claudius Ptolemy than Hamlet's uncle, the usurping King Claudius? I enjoy this reading quite a bit, even if I don't find it very persuasive. Shakespeare was typically omnivorous in his influences, so a handful of astronomical references hardly amounts to a cosmological conspiracy. Besides, even if Shakespeare really did turn off Tycho's well-known portrait, maybe it was for no other reason than to find some good Danish-sounding names. But what higher praise can there be of the deeply layered nuance of Shakespeare's prose than that, to a degree matched only by the complex orbits of the planets themselves? People have never stopped finding secret storylines hidden within it. Hamlet was first performed on stage around the year 1600. It may seem surprising then for cosmological questions to play any role at all in the drama, given that Copernicus' book on the revolutions of the heavenly sphere of the heavenly spheres, the revolutions of Bium Celestium had been in circulation for nearly 60 years at that point. In fact, it took several generations before Copernicus' heliocentric universe convincingly displaced its older geocentrical rival. Copernicus had worked out a mathematical model of a sun-centered cosmos, but as a philosophical proposition, he hadn't advanced the argument much further than where it stood when Archimedes noted it in the 3rd century BC. Placing the sun at the center of the universe offers an elegant solution to why the planets occasionally exhibit a backward or retrograde motion when viewed from the Earth, but Copernicus had no better answer than Ptolemy as to why the planets perform their forward motions with such uneven speeds. Nor could he explain why, if the Earth really was moving in a giant cycle around the Sun, the shapes of the constellations didn't change with the seasons. That is, there was no observable stellar parallax. Most, alar- ar- most alarmingly of all, there still wasn't a halfway possible explanation of why, if there was wiggling at continuous speeds around the sun once per year and its own axis once per day, everything that wasn't bolted down to the ground didn't get hurled off into space. Convincing answers to these questions would need to Tycho's more accurate planetary observations compiled by Kepler as the Rudolphine tables in 1627. Kepler realization that the orbits of the planets are ellipses, not circles. Astronomia Nova 1609. Galileo's development of the laws of motion and inertia, those new sciences 1638, and Newton's then synthesis of physics and astronomy based on the law of universal gravitation Principia Mathematica 1687. Incredibly, there were no instruments precise enough to measure stellar parallax under Friedrich Bessel's observations of the stars 61 Cygni in 1838. In time, people were left to wonder precisely where they stood because the fundamental question was never about the earth or the sun, but rather whether man was at the center of the universe. Tycho, who had radical positions on most of the issues of his day, nevertheless championed the spiritual traditions of Christian metaphysics when he penned this impassioned credo that this universal and most ample theater of the whole cosmic machine or man are renowned the heaven, the earth, the sea, and what is contained within them the sun, the moon, the stars, the animals, planets, plants, and minerals. That these were created by the wisdom of the divine spirit and established for the benefit and necessity not of himself, but for man, whom he fashioned in likeness to his image. No one who is wise can object. And man he therefore placed on the earth at the center of the entire universe, so that from there he might contemplate as if in a mirror the composition and nature of the universal order. And in this way he might, though both is visible and created, recognize to some extent in his mortal life the majesty and wisdom of the invisible and incorporeal God. Clearly, Tycho's commitment to a geocentric cosmos ran much deeper than astronomical arguments alone. In fact, so central so central was the Earth's fixity to Tycho's philosophy that he proposed a compromise cosmology one in which Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn orbited the Sun, as in the Copernican system, but the Sun and Moon orbited the Earth, as in the Ptolemaic system. It Charles Gandhi, and Tycho may have been the only person who ever thought otherwise, but the alternative was truly terrifying. If Copernicus was correct and the Earth was just another planet like Mercury or Mars, to what extent could man be certain that he really was central to the act of creation? It's a melancholy thought, if ever there was one. Today, we are taught from childhood that the Earth is not the center of the universe. So, it's difficult, if not possible, to imagine how dislocating it would be to learn this as an adult. Shakespeare's generation, however, would have had to deal with the psychological fallout of man's devoted status firsthand. If there's any cosmological subtext to be found in Hamlet, I think it is this. Look again at Tycho's declaration of man's place in the cosmos. It provides an almost perfect foil for Hamlet's famous lament to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. This goodly frame the earth seems to me a sterile promontory, this most excellent canopy, the air look you, this breath or a hanging firmament, this majestical roof, freighted with golden fire. Why, it appeared nothing to me but a foul and pestilent congregation of vipers, where the piece of pork is a man. How noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving, how expressed and admirable, in action, how like an angel, in apprehension, how like a god, the beauty of the world, the paragon of animals. And yet to me, what is this pretense of dust? My delights not me? No, nor woman neither. Whether by design or not, this speech could just as well express the gloom of an entire age bewildered at the loss of the odd cosmic harmony. Yet, however intriguing the suggestion, this may be as much as Shakespeare or any of his characters ever has to say about the matter. Words. With regard to the opinion of his time, Shakespeare will never be more than an imperfect witness. He is, however, an impeccable source for its words. A great many things can be learned about an idea simply from its words. This is especially true with astrology, which also happens to the source of many of the most colorful cosmic words and phrases in the English language and many other languages too. Even words as mundane as consonant desire a thought to have an astral origin from the Latin sidus meaning star. If so, there any honest consideratio should properly entail a consultation of the stars, just as every true desideratio is really a wish upon a star. Whatever the etymologies of these words, it's undeniably the case that the Roman emperors, following the lead of Julius Caesar, had great desires of becoming a star. It was similarly during Roman times that the mixing of Hellenistic cosmology with Judaism colored quite likely the Talmudic notion of the seven heavens. These heavens in turn participated in a mystical tenfold hierarchy of angels. Filtered through Islamic writers, this notion found its way into Dante's Paradiso, when to be in seven heaven, that is the sphere of Saturn, was a bliss reserved only for the most contemplative of souls. Since by the late Roman Empire, astrology had become the settled science of its day, the Talmud frequently had cause to reference it The technical term they adopted for a ruling planet of zodiac sign was Mazal. Thus, the expression Mazal of meaning congratulations literally translates to good zodiac sign with the sense of may the ruling zodiac sign be favorable. Of course, the alternative to having a good Mazal is to have a bad Mazal, which would make a slim muscle. This word one occasionally sees in English. This condition was formerly known as being star-struck. Although today the term seems to be reserved solely for the sake of meeting a celebrity. Yet, for all the good that might come from a lucky star or the stars aligning, the bad the bad from a bad star was incomparably worse. It was literally a disaster from Greek this bad and Aster star. A word that appears quite ancient but is actually unattested before the Middle Ages. The disastrous influence of evil stars were to be avoided at all costs, not least because they were believed to corrupt the atmosphere, giving rise to the bad airs of malaria that caused diseases like the Black Plague. One especially nasty influence, or to use Italian word, influenza, was considered responsible for an outbreak of the influenza we now call the flu. The influences of the stars gave each moment its characteristic but fleeting qualities, yet these same influences could leave a permanent mark on your personality if you receive them at particularly critical moments, such as the moment you were born, or even more powerfully, the moment you were conceived. It was Saturn and its cosmic rays that made you Saturnine. Jupiter made you jovial, Mars made you martial, Venus made you venereal, Mercury made you mercurial, and Moon made you a lunatic. The word martial having to do with war and venereal having to do with sex are close enough to their namesake deities, Mars and Venus, to still align with the classical astrological meanings. Lunacy of being moonstruck is likewise an ancient malady whose symptoms encompass madness and most characteristically epilepsy. The word order, the other planetary adjectives, however, other meanings mainly to astrology. To an ancient Roman, for instance, similes involving Saturn were reserved for the Saturnine Golden Age or the merriment of the winter solstice festival, the Saturnalia, in other words, the exact opposite of melancholy gloom conveyed by our modern astrologically influenced word Saturnine. Melancholy was the acknowledged cause of harmless moodiness, although he disguised it by pretending a turbulent and dangerous lunacy. Hamlet, however, is sadly the only character whom Shakespeare describes in planetary terms. Shakespeare's plays are filled with astrological references, and so too are they filled with astrological words. Yet surprisingly, there is one word that never appears anywhere in the entire corpus of Shakespeare's writings: astrology. Shakespeare preferred the more poetic starry, stars, and their variants, which occur nearly 150 times in his sonnets and plays. He does, however, make use of the word astronomy, whose variants appear on 4 occasions: astronomer, Cymbeline 3.2, astronomers, Troilus and Cressida 5.1, astronomical, King Lear 1.2, and in sonnet which begins, "Not from the stars do I my judgment block, and yet methinks I have astronomy." Shakespeare's meaning in each of these 4 instances is unambiguously astrological. In other words, every time Shakespeare says astronomy, what he really means is astrology. We saw much the same thing with Guido Bonatti's astrological treatise on astronomy, the Astronomia Tractatus X. Where this careless slips up, an embarrassing case of mistaken identity. From modern perspective, it can be quite disorienting to see how fleet and interchangeable these words used to be, especially since today we tend to picture the word astronomy standing in deviant opposition to the word astrology, their different spellings proclaiming starkly different views about the universe and what makes it tick. And yet, to look back, as in Table 9.1, at the sources we've encountered in this book, together with few others added in for good measure, it's clear that the histories of these two words are so tightly intertwined that neither can be fully untangled from the other. The pith and marrow of its attribute. There's no question that the trajectories of these two worlds through time often overlap. But does this really mean, as is often claimed, that there was no difference at all between the words astronomy and astrology in the run-up to the scientific revolution? In many cases, it certainly seems that way. In cultures contemporaries, for example, the words astronomy and astrology each appears three times with no obvious distinction between them. To answer this question properly, though, it would be nice to know more about how often and in what context these two words were used at the time. Unfortunately, although an impressive number of medieval and Renaissance texts have now been photographically digitized, the optical character recognition on older documents remains quite poor, such that, in general, it's not possible to perform simple computerized word searches. Incidentally, this is a problem that today's artificial vision algorithms can certainly handle and presumably will over the next decade or so. Nevertheless, if you are a fan of mathematical games and puzzles, then you've probably heard the mathematician George Polya's famous advice. If you can't solve a problem, then there is an easier problem you can solve. Find it. Allow me, then, to propose an easier problem. In place of the first category of the text written prior to the scientific revolution, we can examine instead the well-defined category of books printed on the printing press before the year 1500. These special books are called incunabula, a Latin word which loosely translates to cradle books. They are called his because they represent the earliest infancy of the publishing industry in the decades following Johannes Gutenberg's introduction of the printing press around the year 1450. Because of their historical significance, efforts to track down and catalog incunabula have been especially thorough. The Incunabula Subtitle Catalogue (ISTC) of the British Library, for example, maintains a database of 3,518 editions, which they claim records nearly every item printed from movable type before 1501. Unfortunately, a global search for variants of the words astronomy and astrology in this text is currently not feasible. A cheap substitute, though we can search through just the titles. The drawbacks to this are fairly obvious. For starters, A number of significant books will be excluded by this approach. Thus, Nite Regiomontanus epitome of the Almagest, which was the most important astronomy book of the 1500s, nor his tables of directions, where he introduced his new system of astrological houses, will be included in our sample, since the letter has the correct keyword in its title. On the flip side, however, this approach will be include important works like Manilius Astronomica. The first printed edition of this poem was published in 1573 by, of all people, Regiomontanus, who, aside of venture, set up the world's first scientific press in Nuremberg, Germany. A more subtle problem with using just a title search is that the short title entries in the ISTC database often do not correspond with the full title of the work, some of which even interchange astronomy and astrology. For this reason, I've limited the sample to only those titles. Still, the majority that can be verified by consulting a digitized facsimile or, in a few special cases, a physical copy. This results in pared down sample of 28 titles, which, however, still presents a fascinating snapshot of astral writings from the late Middle Ages and early Renaissance. To display how frequently our two classes of book titled astronomy versus astrology coincide with our two classes of subject matter, astronomy versus astrology. These 28 titles can be arranged into what's called a contingency table. Of course, some amount of subjectivity is unavoidable in deciding which book goes into which bin, but for the most part this proved to be surprisingly straightforward. My best effort to identify and show the sample of titles is shown in table 9.2. The first thing that jumps out from the contingency table is that there are a lot more books about astrology than astronomy, 23 versus 5. In this respect, maybe not much has changed over the last 600 years, but unlike today, the astrology books are split right down the middle with respect to their titles: 11 astronomy versus 12 astrology. This certainly supports the contention that the words astronomy and astrology were indeed interchangeable, at least when it came to books about astrology. But the story looks quite different from astronomy books. Here the split is 4 to 1 in favor of titles containing the word astronomy. This suggests an added nuance, namely that the words swapping work mainly one way, and that for purely astronomical topics the term astronomy was predominant even during the 1400s. This is an intriguing observation, and it may even be true. Unfortunately, from a statistics point of view, it's not possible to draw this conclusion confidently. Regardless of which statistical test you use, the number of books in our sample is just too small. A scenario is roughly equivalent to flipping a coin 5 times and getting 4 heads and 1 tails. It's a result that may make you feel lucky, but it's not quite enough to convince you that your coin is special. If anything, you probably want to flip the coin some more times to see what happens next, which is exactly our case. To bring any sort of clarity to this question, we would need to add more examples to our table. Alas, absent the ability to search through these texts more thoroughly, we must leave the question as tantalizingly inconclusive as when we found it. the time is out of joint. Whatever the finer grained subtleties, there is no denying that the boundary between the words astronomy and astrology was pretty blurry in the run-up to the scientific revolution. But why is this interesting? More importantly, it's a reminder that the boundaries between the actual people involved, the individual astronomers and astrologers, remain every bit as blurry. At the University of Bologna, for example, when Copernicus went to continue his studies, it was the responsibility of the professor of astronomy to publish, at the start of every year, an unabashedly astrological forecast called the prognosticon. These pamphlets outline major celestial happenings such as upcoming conjunctions and eclipses, alongside predictions about the weather, politics, the ecology plus, and various social trends. In 1487, for instance, women were predicted to be particularly frisky due to the influence of the planet Venus. Astrological prognostica, which are the ancestors of our modern almanacs, quickly became a staple of the early printing houses. Indeed, astrology and the Bible have been the two constants of the publishing industry ever since its inception. The most astronomical counterpart to the prognosticon, and often authored by the same university, Astronomer Astrologers, was a publication called the Computus, meaning the computation. The booklets provided tables and algorithms for computing the cycles of the moon, of the sun and moon, specifically as they pertain to determining the days of Easter and the other movable feasts of the year. The major factor that kept this competing computing in print was that by the 15th century the rules for computing Easter had become increasingly confusing. The problem was that the Julian calendar year of 365.25 days is slightly longer than the actual solar year, as measured from equinox to equinox. Year by year, the astronomical pre-equinox was sneaking further and further ahead of March 21 was the church-sanctioned equinox date for the selecting Easter Sunday. Addressing this mismatch was always of a more political problem than an astronomical one, then it wasn't until the 1570s that a compelling compromise was put forward. This proposal, drafted by certain Aloysius, was circulated in a document addressed in bold letters to the expert mathematicians, Peritis Mathematicis. As well, in his proposal, Lilius referred to these same savants as the expert astrologers, Peritis Astrologis. After some debate, Lilius' plan was adopted by the Catholic Church, and so by the decree of Pope Gregory XIII, Thursday, October 4, 1582, was immediately followed by Friday, October 15, 1582. This intervening 10 days simply never happened. This disruptive beginning to the new Gregorian calendar, named for its papal patron, was one time fixed meant to bring the spring equinox back to its nominal date of March 21. Then moving forward, the length of the Gregorian year will be shortened by the following scheme. Every fourth year is a leap year unless the year is divided by 100. Unless the year is also divisible by 400. Thus, 1900 wasn't a leap year and 2100 won't be a leap year, but as those of us who experienced the canonical confusion of the millennium may recall, the year 2000 was a leap year. The effect of having only 97 leaps every 400 years is to reduce the length of the average to 365 plus 365.2425 days, or 36 365 days, 5 hours, 49 minutes, and 12 seconds. How close is this to the actual length of the year? Well, it turns out that it's not possible to assign a definitive length to the year in terms of days, since the Earth's rotation is gradually but unevenly slowing down, which means that the length of a day is gradually but unevenly getting longer. Duly noting this, the average duration from spring equinox to spring equinox is currently about 365.242374 days, or 365 days, 5 hours, 49 minutes, and 1 second. We can all rest all day then, knowing that the Gregorian calendar is not expected to gain or lose a day with respect to the astronomical spring equinox for several thousand more years. Today, the Gregorian calendar is recognized as a standard civil calendar the world over. However, because it was initially conceived within the Roman Catholic Church, the non-Catholic countries at first resisted it, in some cases for an extraordinarily long time. Britain and her colonies didn't switch over until 1752, at which point the Gregorian-Julian discrepancy had grown to 11 days. Most of Eastern Europe, meanwhile, remained on the Julian calendar well into the 20th century. This is why, for example, as far as the Western world is concerned, Russia's October Revolution of 1917 actually occurred in November. Copernicus cited the prospect of a more accurate calendar as one reason why he hoped, quite wrongly, that his new sun-centered theory of the universe might be well received by the Church. In the meantime, it was expressly to avoid any calendrical confusion that Copernicus, following the example of Ptolemy's Almagest, used the ancient Egyptian calendar of 365 days and no questions for his calculations. For this same reason, modern astronomers also use a simplified calendar for long-term orbit computations. It involves nothing more than tolling the days from a mostly arbitrary start date of Monday, January 1, 4713 BC. This day count is called the Julian day, denoted JD. It's an unfortunate name since it's easily confused with the Julian calendar for which it was derived. However, the Julian day and Julian calendar exist independently from each other. This seems, and its strange start date were originally proposed, albeit in slightly altered form, by Joseph Scaliger in 1583 in the book entitled On the Emendation of Times, the Emendatione Temporum. To give an example of its use, January 1, 2000 is JD 2451545, a nice reminder that all of recorded history consists of not much than more 2 million days, minus a small correction for change in the Earth's rotation denoted delta t. The Julian calendar is the only temporal input needed to compute the scenes of heaven which appear in this book. Employing the ancient Egyptian calendar wasn't the only way in which Copernicus consciously modeled his De Revolutionibus after Ptolemy's Almagest. He consistently eschewed words like astronomy and astronomer in favor of Ptolemaic terms mathematics and mathematician. This famous line, often translated as astronomy is written for astronomers, is more accurately rendered as mathematics is written for mathematics, mathemata mathematicis scribundur. Whatever its translation, this little quip was hardly enough to deflect the theological and cosmological uproar Copernicus knew his book would incite. Instead, Copernicus adopted a more definitive strategy of conflict avoidance, which was to delay publication until 1543, The same year he died peacefully of old age. It's easy to overlook by the appearance of the De Revolutionibus didn't mark the end of the controversy about whether the Earth orbits the Sun. On the contrary, it signaled the beginning. And just as with the old and new calendars, the old astronomy in its lingo lingered on with the new for much longer than one might otherwise suppose. For example, Tycho's account for the supernova of 1572 consisted only partly of an astronomical analysis of what he called a mathematical contemplatio mathematica. Appended to it was an astrological judgment, astrologicum iudicium, in which Tycho forecast worldwide upheavals of the sort not seen since Christ's birth and the rise of the Roman Empire. In fact, many of the most forward-looking thinkers of 1500s and 1600s mixed their astronomy, astrology, and mathematics together, and many believe that astrology, stripped of the superstitious algorithms of judicial astrology, could be recast as a respectable science. Tycho, who often referred to both astrologies, a reference to Ptolemy's distinction between general and genealogical astrology, proposed by a detailed scheme for correlating planetary and weather observations. Johannes Kepler suggested that astrology should be reduced to solely a consideration of planetary aspects, and Girolamo Cardano, who is best known today as a mathematician, compiled a list of horoscopic case studies much like Matthew's Valens before him. Even the Rudolphine tables, Kepler's monumental astronomical tables, based on Tycho's observations and his own newly discovered of laws of planetary motion, included a section on how to cast horoscopes. Incredibly, for a work that is today regarded as one of the crowning achievements of the scientific revolution, Kepler acknowledged that astrology was likely the only reason why most people would consult his tables at all. Kepler had reason to know. Following Tycho's death in 1601, Kepler succeeded his sometime patron, sometime collaborator, and sometime rival as imperial mathematician to the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II in Prague, the emperor from whom the Rudolphine tables are named. Of course, the role of the imperial mathematician wasn't to solve math problems. The job of a mathematicus, as Kepler noted, is to write the annual prognostica, which indeed Kepler did for many years. Did Kepler believe in astrology? His private papers contain a mind-boggling collection of over 1,000 horoscope casts with his own hand. As a young man, he scrutinized the horoscope of his newborn son with all sincerity, yet by the time he completed the Rudolphine tables in 1627, just a few years before his death, his exasperation with the dreams and nonsense of horoscopic predictions appears to be total. Johannes Kepler, the genius who discovered the three laws of planetary motion in Tycho's scattered data, was unable to find any pattern at all in all the horoscopes he cast. It wasn't for lack of trying. Despite its relativity-led publication, the Rudolphine tables may also be the first major work to explicitly differentiate astronomy and astrology along the lines we know them by today. Kepler states that both were originally known by one name, astrologia, but that they were now separate enterprises deserving of the separate names which later users had given them. Yet, while Kepler is clear that astronomy had finally outgrown its astrological infancy, he insists that astronomy cannot deny its astrological origins any more than a daughter can deny her own father. The relationship is to use in the observations, instruments, and calculations which the one he has passed down to the other. For Kepler, therefore, setting aside a section of his astronomical tables of astrology was simply an act of filial devotion. Otherwise, modern astrology might complain that she has been abandoned and scorned by her ungrateful and arrogant daughter, astronomy. Coming from Kepler, this is an especially poignant metaphor. He wrote those words shortly after spending 6 agonizing years defending his own mother in court against a capital charge of witchcraft. The Rudolphine tables illustrate that even as late as the 1620s, astronomy and astrology were just beginning to go their separate ways. Professionally, the differences would hardly have been noticeable. Take a look, for example, at Johannes Vermeer's famous painting, The Astronomer, page 14. The sitter's profession is indicated by two instruments, a celestial globe and lying flat on the table, and a stripe. The portrait was painted in 1668, nearly 40 years after Kepler's death. But these are the same two instruments that would have signified a new astronomer, astrologer, from the time of Ptolemy. What Conspicuous did not present is the recently invented telescope. If, as many have argued, Vermeer used lenses and mirrors while painting, then we have to acknowledge the historical irony that even well into the 17th century, a painter might employ more advanced optics than an astronomer. The development of the telescope as an instrument to investigate the heavens is due, of course, to Galileo, who, like Kepler, was astrologically curious enough to cast horoscopes for his own children. The telescope partly symbolizes astronomy's emancipation from astrology. It embodies what the new Christians astronomy was asking the ingenious approaches being used to answer them. Hamlet was right, there are more things in heaven and earth that had been dreamed in anyone's philosophy, and it was through the telescope that the truth of these words became visible at last to anyone who cared to look.